Let's get more insight now from Arwa Damon, who joins us live from Deir Balah. She's the president and founder of INARA, a nonprofit that provides access to life-altering medical and mental health care to children impacted by human-induced or natural disasters. Arwa, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. So as we've been reporting, Israel is saying that they have improved humanitarian access to Gazans on the ground. Aid organizations say the opposite, saying that's not the case, and they're warning of famine now. Walk us through your observations from central Gaza.
Well, let's just start off with the numbers of trucks that were listed in that earlier report. The requirement was at least 350 a day. What we saw for October, for example, the average was roughly 30 a day, and that pretty much is a trend that continues. What this has done and what this continues to create is these inexplicably dire circumstances that people are trying to cope with. The access for humanitarian assistance, the amount of aid that we're actually able to get to people is at its lowest level in the last year. People are hungry, they're cold, they're unable to access sufficient clean water, they're unable to access medical care, and even the bare basics are missing. When you walk around and you speak to people, they need everything from diapers to sanitary pads to winter clothing to medicines for any number of illnesses or, other health issues that they might have. And that's not even getting into the situation at the hospitals. We talk a lot about hospitals in Gaza being partially functioning. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? It means that if you have a catastrophic injury from a bomb, there's someone at the hospital that is going to try to stop the bleeding. But does the hospital actually have what it needs to save your life? No.
Absolutely not. I mean, we've heard from medical personnel that's working on the ground that have said time after time that they need more medical supplies to tend to their patients. We've seen video after video, Arwa, of civilians displaced from the areas that they were sheltering in. A lot of children in these scenes that we've seen on our television screens, on our phones, children that don't have shoes on their feet that are making these journeys. I mean, you mentioned it's cold, winter is coming. These children don't have the necessary gear to embrace the winter weather.
When I'm driving around, actually, it's the shoes that for some reason is something that sort of my eye always clocks. How many children don't have shoes? And they're walking around, lugging water that weighs more than they do. There's open sewage running through, the streets and the camps. And on another issue, for example, specifically relating to children, is Al-Aqsa Hospital doesn't have sufficient pediatric tracheostomy tubes to be able to stabilize the smallest survivors of a bombing. And I met a little boy who was just 2 years old over the weekend. And, luckily, the last time I was here, I was able to secure some pediatric tracheostomy tubes. And I met this little boy because one of those tubes was actually used to save his life. Now, this is a little boy, again, just 2 years old, who twice had already been pulled out from underneath the rubble. And when I went to see him, he was sitting up with his mom, but you could see something sort of pulsing out from right here. And I asked the doctor, what is that? And he said, it's his brain, because his skull had been cracked open and they had to remove a part of the bone and were only able to close the skin over it. Then I found out that this little boy's father had also been killed in that second explosion, the second time that he had been pulled out from underneath the rubble. But I am continuously struck by just how absurd it is that there are insufficient things like a pediatric tracheostomy tube. It is quite literally a tiny little piece. It's this big. There's nothing about it that is dual use or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, as you explain this, I bear to ask the question, why has the world sat back and watched all this unfold, all these horrific scenes unfold? And as someone who's actively been working on the ground in Gaza, how would you best describe how Palestinians feel, how Palestinians there feel about the inaction?
Despondent, heartbroken, gutted, angry, but And this is sort of the tragedy of all of it, they're not entirely surprised because they have consistently, especially when it comes to the Western perspective, been viewed as less than. They are very, very highly aware of how, especially Western nations, don't necessarily view their lives as having value. And this is something that, is sort of a dark, cynical joke, but at the same time really goes to the core of the many challenges that, we face globally as a society. The fact that, so many nations, leaders, people are willing to allow what we're seeing in Gaza to continue.
All right, Arwa Damon, thank you so much for joining me here on the NewsHour. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.